The 1960s were a definitive period in the music industry. For the first time in history, a British band had broke the charts. Beatlemania was rising, and so were people's interest in British music. Prior to this point in time, the UK charts were awash with American singers and film scores. But the Beatles hit the number one spot 17 times. No band or artist since has been able to do this.
3 records, Please Please Me, She Loves You and I Wanna Hold Your Hand are all number one.
This list shows all the number ones the Beatles had, and all in less than a decade. But we're not just here to talk about the Beatles. We're here to talk about the staples of the British music industry. The bands that have kept music in Britain alive. Invasion Network presents the last UK rock bands to break the charts. Our story begins in 1920's Jacksonville, Florida. Blind Blake was one of the very first artists to introduce guitar into the ragtime music scene. Before this point, ragtime music was usually played on piano. Scott Joplin, the entertainer, released in 1902. While Scott Joplin is widely known as the inventor of ragtime music, you can hear how it inspired Blind Blake's fingerpicking style in his song Seaboard Stomp. This new guitar-based version of ragtime music went on to inspire countless musicians, eventually crisscrossing its way over to the British Isles.
We've only got a few minutes to spare.
George Formby. This cheeky chappie, believe it or not, was banned from the BBC. His lyrics were considered too naughty to be played on national radio. The musical establishment hated it and effectively banned his first single in 1933, entitled My Ukulele. There was a real censorship of working class expression. Real music by real artists were being stamped out left, right and centre, eventually being overshadowed by the dancehall craze. Up until the 1940s, the BBC were cancelling anything that wasn't squeaky clean. The Brits had no other option but to smuggle in records from other countries. Pirate radio ships were springing up everywhere. They would anchor themselves just off the coast of England, so it was legal. It was the people versus the establishment, and the establishment was a sinking ship. The people of Britain were finally hearing something new, the fresh rock and roll sounds of America. This sound went on to inspire Lonnie Donegan and Tommy Steele of the Steelmen, but made popular by Cliff Richard and the Shadows. In 1959, Cliff and the Shadows managed to reach number one with the song Living Doll. Even though American rock and roll music was popular over here in Britain, this was the first time a UK band was successful with this sound and made it into the charts. Although reaching the number one spot 12 times in just 4 years, Britain needed to find its own unique sound. We needed something made in Britain. Liverpool in the early 1960s would be the birthplace of this new British music. New acts like The Searchers, Billy J. Kramer, Jerry and the Pacemakers and the Hollies were just some of the first British acts to make it into the mainstream. The Cavern Club in Liverpool would be the breeding grounds for these new bands. With a distinctive emphasis on the beat and the snare, it would also undergo a new name. Beat music, or the Mersey beat. Rocking this new sound to the number one spot, bands like The Kinks, The Rolling Stones, The Animals, The Small Faces, and The Who would go on to become household names. But by the tail end of the 60s, bands were getting fed up of their squeaky clean image and wanted to try and orchestrate their music in a heavier way. The Who by 1966 cracked and started to smash their instruments on stage. Instrument destruction became an integral part of their concerts. Pete Townsend known for smashing up his Gibsons, later switching to Fenders because they were cheaper. Even Keith Moon had a go at it. The Beatles, they took this as a challenge to write heavier music.
I got blisters on my fingers! To the bottom, I go back to the top of the side.
Exhausted from constant touring, the Beatles, by 1966, had completely stopped playing live. Instead, they decided to spend more time in the studio, coming up with new concepts in sound. Helter Skelter was released on the 20th of November 1968. With this sound, they helped create a global shift in the music industry. It was the Beatles' heaviest song, and this sound would pave the way for a future generation. On October the 16th, 1969, Black Sabbath was born. Consisting of guitarist Tony Iommi, bassist Geezer Butler, drummer Bill Ward, and lead singer Ozzy Osbourne. They recorded their first album in London's Regent Sound Studios. It took them just 12 hours to record a whole album, opening with rain, thunder, and a tolling bell, followed by the tritone, known as the Devil's Interval, sounded the birth of a new form of music, heavy metal.
I was born John Michael Osborne, December 3rd, 1948. I was raised in Aston, a working-class suburb of Birmingham, England. A lot of the city was destroyed by the Germans in World War II. I used to play on a bum building site thinking it was the name of a place that you go and play, not realising it was a building that had been bombed by in the war, you know. I didn't have a great deal of money. My parents did the best they could for us. And when I was a kid, we'd have like a can of Heinz soup in a saucepan and then another can of water to make it go further. I mean, when I was a kid, we used to go scrumping for crab apples. I remember the first time I started at the Beverly Hills Hotel, the family climbed by a tree. I was filling my shirt full of oranges. I go, well, we do have them on room service, so I know it kind of, the old habits don't die, you know.
Black Sabbath released 2 albums in the year 1970. The second album, Paranoid, had some major success, with the self-titled song, Paranoid, went to number 4 in the charts. This was a major achievement for the band, as they'd never really received much popularity in the mainstream.
It wasn't until we got back from Europe that we realised the album was in the charts. Listening to the countdown, and the guy said, Black Sabbath. And we went, what? And we thought, is there 2 Black Sabbaths or something?
Black Sabbath had finally become rock star status. Ozzy Osbourne would be forever known as the Prince of Darkness. Now that the heavy metal riff had been invented, other bands would emerge, solidifying the unique raw sound of the 70s. Deep Purple reached number 2 in the charts with their song Black Knight, and had 6 songs in the top 40. While Led Zeppelin, on the other hand, opted to stay out of the singles market and only release albums. Even without any chart success, they managed to become very popular worldwide. Every country they played in, they had a following. Inspired by American rock and roll, they would also go on to be huge in the States, cementing their legendary early career. And Pink Floyd would achieve success in the late 60s with Arnold Layne and See Emily Play, but they then delved into darker territory. Be Careful with the Axe, Eugene, released in 1969, could quite possibly contain the very first death scream. Was it Pink Floyd who inspired death metal years later? Well, they could be. Many 60s bands turned to experimentalism in the 70s, including Hawkwind, who at the time was led by Lemmy Ian Kilminster, who they later on fired for his experimentalism. This upset Lemmy at the time, because if it wasn't for him, they wouldn't have reached number 3 in the charts. And David Bowie had his first hit in 1969 with Space Oddity. It reached number 5 in the charts. Bowie's audience would grow at a rapid pace as a result. By the end of 1972, Bowie had 8 hits in the UK charts, with 7 of them being in the top 10, skyrocketing Ziggy to stardom. T-Rex was another early 70s band on a winning streak. They reached the number 1 spot 4 times in under 2 years, and had 21 UK top 40 hits, and simultaneously spearheaded the glam rock movement with lighter riffs, big hair, and glittery cheeks. And the softer rock sound helped make rock music more accessible. In the mid-70s, softer rock bands like Status Quo were the next big thing. Influenced from old blues and rock and roll, they managed to make pop without being pop. They have only had 1 UK number 1 hit, but have had 22 UK top 10s. Slade, on the other hand, had 6 number 1 hits in the space of 3 years, and 16 top 10s. But it would be their Christmas song that skyrocketed them to prominence, and is still regarded as one of Britain's most favourite festive anthems, reaching the UK charts every December. And Elton John would also go on to break the charts. From 1971 to 1973, he'd already had 7 top 10 hits in the UK charts, his style ranging from subtle piano ballads to full-on stadium rock. Elton would be adored by a wide range of fans, and is still regarded a national treasure. Now unfortunately, I'm going to have to bring up this man. Gary Glitter. Other than being a disgusting paedophile, he also released loads of charting songs in the 70s. He had 3 UK number 1s and 12 UK top 10s. Why his songs are still in kids' movies, I have no idea. Anyway, swiftly moving on. Mud, another 70s glam rock band that really shifted those numbers in the charts. But let's be honest, bands were starting to lose their edge. The unnecessarily garish costumes didn't help. UK rock needed a resurgence. Motorhead. Established in 1975, they brought back the hard, fast sound of heavy metal. Lemmy Kilminster, who formed Motorhead, wanted to create the hardest sound in rock and roll. He later on achieved that goal, live and on tour.
In America with Ozzy Osbourne, and they came off that tour and came back and did a show at Portobello Football Ground. They could hear it 12 miles as the crow flies. At that time, Audio Lease put in the biggest audio system that had ever been assembled in the UK. It was like 135,000 watts. When they fired the rig up, they took out the local substation. It blew up. We were drawing so much electricity.
Out of nowhere, the new wave of British heavy metal was on the horizon. A vast array of heavier bands started to emerge on the scene, alongside the inception of the UK punk movement, with bands like the Sex Pistols, the Clash, and the Buzzcocks being the main runners, all managing to reach the UK top 10. Punk became an escape for the disenfranchised people of the UK. When you're working all week and struggling to feed a family, it's pretty hard to sing about tiger feet in a disco. The Sex Pistols would cause major offence to the royal family. Their anti-establishment song, God Save the Queen, went straight to number 2 in the charts, coinciding with the Queen's anniversary celebrations. This caused uproar. The royal family and BBC had the song banned off every station, on the grounds of bad taste. The record company sacked the band and destroyed the 25,000 remaining LPs. The Queen officially stopped them from hitting the number 1 spot. Which, ladies and gentlemen, brings us on to our next band.
She keeps a Moet Chandon in a pretty cabinet, cakes, she said.
You didn't think I'd forgotten about this band, did you? Queen, established in 1970. Although not charting until 74, their first hit, Killer Queen, would reach number 2 in the charts. Their albums and back catalogue became immediately popular. They managed to create a sound that was appealing to all ages, but at the same time never lost its rock edge. Freddie Mercury's distinctive operatic vocal style, combined with the rock edge, really made for a memorable performance. Bohemian Rhapsody was released 1 year later. It was their most experimental song of the time, but it went to number 1 in the charts, making Queen the most accessible band of the time, with another band coming in close second, ELO. From Birmingham and established in 1970, ELO would go on to have a string of hits in the UK charts. With 13 UK top 10s in the space of 8 years, they'd never be forgotten. Being a band to transition through different genres really helped get them into the clubs. By defying expectations and merging genres, they become one of the biggest bands very quickly. Meanwhile, the more grittier bands were starting to make a name for themselves. Bands like The Jam, The Specials, and Madness, they would slowly but surely start to invade the charts. All being a bunch of misfits, they didn't want to create typical pop music. They wanted their own edge, and at the time, that's what the industry desperately needed. 70s Britain also birthed new wave and indie with bands like The Cure, and not forgetting the creation of electronic music with bands like The Human League.
Listen to the voice of Buddha.
And Gary Newman. With the introduction of synthesizers and oscillators, 70s music was going through a transformation. Cars by Gary Newman was released on the 21st of August 1979, and it reached number 1 in the UK charts and become a staple of the British new wave synth pop genre. And Joy Division put indie on the map. Unfortunately, the band only lasted 2 years, with lead singer Ian Curtis sadly dying. It was time to say goodbye to the 1970s, and hello to the 1980s, filled with bold colour and vibrance, brought about with the introduction of colour telly. New Order formed from the remaining members of Joy Division in 1980, carrying on Ian Curtis's musical legacy.
John Bonham, drummer with the British rock group Led Zeppelin since its inception in 1968, was found dead today at the home of a friend in Windsor, England. Bonham was 32.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tom Brokaw. This is Today, December 9th. I'm here with Jane Pauley, and this entire half hour will be devoted to the murder of John Lennon, ex-Beatle, one of the best-known musicians and most influential people of his time. Lennon was shot and killed at about 11 o'clock last night outside his apartment building. News of the Lennon shooting, of course, spread quickly around the world.
With quite an abrupt start to the 1980s, the sad death of 3 legends, the British spirit only knows one way to move on, and that's keeping the party alive. David Bowie reinvented himself, and he came out with Ashes to Ashes, which stayed at number 1 for 6 weeks. And Pink Floyd's Another Brick in the Wall peaked at number 1, and stayed there for 6 weeks. Bands with more socially aware aspects to their songs started to get into the charts, with more political satire and delving into deeper issues. The 80s also showed its spiritual side. Soft Cell would release their song Tainted Love, peaking at number 1 in the charts for 2 weeks. The Communards would also strike number 1 with their song You Are My World, and they stayed there for 6 weeks. It was around this point in 1986 when house and dance acts were being brought from America and being transmitted to a live UK TV audience. A new sound was coming from the Chicago... Oh, bloody, you take over, love.
A new new sound was coming from the Chicago clubs, and Top of the Pops hosted the act that launched house in the UK.
Cheers.
It's easy to say in retrospect that it was clearly the start of something. But I think it was the start of something.
Now this is how it started. My dreams are broken hearted. And I won't give.
Mate, it was a totally different sound.
It was a totally different sound that everybody was talking about and getting really, really excited about.
By the late 80s, dance music had made itself popular through the underground network and via pirate radio stations. But it didn't take the Brits long to start a rave culture of their own. After 10 years of austerity laid out by Margaret Thatcher, the new generation wanted to live free. They didn't want to play the dusty old radio records. They wanted a fresh sound, a sound of the future. Bands like the Stone Roses, the Happy Mondays and the Inspiral Carpets were all part of the Manchester scene, combining indie, breakbeat and electronic elements. There was another band as well at this point that I must point out. The Smiths. And as previously mentioned, the Inspiral Carpets. Which, I'm sorry guys, is the worst band name ever. It sounds like a carpet shop. But it was around this point when DJs started to experiment with old samples. Allman Brother by the Winstons, released in 1969, is famously known as the most sampled drum pattern in the music industry, utilised by many groups, such as the Shut Up and Dance duo from 1988, Messiah the Prince of Darkness from 1991, and Global Method from 1991, and not forgetting its use over in the States. The Almond Break was everywhere, and it wouldn't be long until it was in the UK charts. Brand new acts like The Prodigy, Urban Hype, The Chemical Brothers, and Goldie would be the trailblazers of UK drum and bass.
Goings on right now out there, and when an environment gets taken so far where they're being oppressed by a system and by bad policing and by bad community help and bad housing, which is the main thing which has caused the problem, they made a nest, they made a lair. You know, and they're now paying the price for that. And they blame it on the youth culture of today because of that situation.
It's the first British music, really, probably since punk, really. It is just totally British. And it's the first thing that we've had and created for a long time. Goldie just came along and shifted everything, and he's the godfather, really.
It's kind of went, you're all idiots, because I don't believe in any of you now. And I think the thing with drum and bass music, at its pure source, it was the punk of this country. It was about working the music that was completely fresh and new. And you got this one record going here, and you got this record going here, and these two records get into the mix, and they just happen at this moment. And for that moment, it's neither one of those two artists, and it's just hyped. It just works.
The Prodigy by 92 had 3 major top 10 hits, with Outer Space, Everybody in Their Place, and Charlie. Even to this day, their popularity hasn't faded. They've had 11 UK top 10s and spent 40 weeks in the top 10, alongside having 2 number 1s with Firestarter and Breathe, causing the popularity of drum and bass to go global.
The government didn't know what it was, the police didn't know how to control it, the kids ran it.
It was basically invisible, wasn't it?
It was
Unless you were
invisible.
part of it, and so many people were part of it.
My sort of entry into rave culture was, I come back from travelling, and one of her mates come round and was just telling me about rave parties and the Barn, which was a local club that we used to go to. You know, and just was talking about it with such enthusiasm and such passion that I thought I got to be a part of this.
It was also around this point when there was a resurgence of British bands, such as the Happy Mondays, Primal Scream, Cast, and the LAs, all bringing with them a unique down-to-earth sound, incorporating more of a working class feel and unapologetically accentuate their regional accents, but more importantly, making UK rock relevant again. Blur, a band formed in 1988 in London. They didn't release anything until 1990 with She's So High. but they only reached number 48 in the charts, and after 3 weeks, other artists had already taken their spot. It would be a year later when they had chart success. They got into the top 10 with their song There's No Other Way. But they were struggling to keep the ball rolling. Their next 5 singles just weren't hitting the top 10. It was as if they needed some sort of healthy competition. Straight from the damp rehearsal rooms of Manchester arrived Oasis, fronted by lead singer Liam Gallagher and his brother Noel. Davina, do you want to take over, love?
And I love Oasis too, and that's precisely why I made this wish last night, so I could see the band and you couldn't.
You always have to rub it in.
As you may have guessed, we've got Oasis here in the studio. It's Liam on vocals, Noel on guitar, and Paul Booned on keyboards. Booned.
Their 1994 debut album, Definitely Maybe, went straight in at number 1 in the charts. 3 of the first 5 singles they released went straight into the top 10. And on the 6th of May 1995, they got their first UK number 1, plus being showcased on numerous TV shows, causing them to become one of the biggest UK bands overnight. Oasis had become an international success, and Blur felt overshadowed by Oasis's success, and they took it upon themselves to get musically competitive and release The Great Escape, which had more of an upbeat pop sound. Girls and Boys, released on the 19th of March 1994, went straight to number 5 in the charts, shortly followed by Park Life, which hit number 10 in the charts, boosting them into mainstream popularity and sparking a controversial feud over which band would make it to number 1, Blur or Oasis. It was the first time ever that 2 bands had been pitted against each other by the media. Oasis released Roll With It on the 26th of August 1995 in an attempt to hit the number 1 spot, but Blur managed to steal it off them at the last minute with their song Country House.
Maybe I don't really want to know how your garden grows, because I just want to fly. Lately, did you ever feel pain in the morning rain as it soaked you to the bone? If that can't get appeal to people, right, and sell, right, but then a song that comes along which goes, girls who like boys, who dig girls who like boys, who dig girls who like boys, who love girls who like boys, who dig girls who like boys, who love girls who like boys. If that appeals to the mentality of a human being, then that's sad.
Parlophone, Andy Ross, fuck off. I'd like to thank Noel for complimenting my wardrobe. Cheers, and I don't own a cardigan, you bastard.
Oasis then decided to go all out and write a pop tune of their own. Oasis wrote Wonderwall, which shot up into the charts at number 2, shortly followed by their next pop track. On the 2nd of March 1996, Oasis released Don't Look Back in Anger, which hit the number 1 spot, causing Oasis to go platinum, and ended up winning 3 Brit Awards, eventually stopping Blur from achieving any awards.
I'd like to thank all the people, so many people, and they walk your counting house, and it is through their shite life.
After this, we knew that Oasis could hold their own, and they didn't really have anything to worry about anymore.
What do you think of Blur these days?
What? Not a lot.
Not that.
No. Yeah, I'm not in competition anymore with a Blur and that. Blur is Blur. You know what I mean? It took them 5 years to get number 1, right? It took us fucking 12 months, yeah?
If you've got the time to sit down and worry about American culture creeping into British society, then I would get a proper fucking job. You know. You're such a condescending cock, innit, you know? Oh fuck, I wrote this album so I could stop American culture coming to Britain. Fucking wanker.
What's up?
John, would it be okay to stand over there?
Stand there and ask your question.
Okay.
It's gonna be fine.
Okay, I'll check. Okay.
All gonna be fine.
Okay.
Don't worry about it, mate.
Okay. Okay, as long as we got that on tape, that's all that counts.
Well, what we're looking for here is lots of eye contact. Okay?
Who are you?
My name's Damon Albarn. Who are you?
I am Nardwar, a human serviette. Damon, who do you have with you?
Why do you call yourself a human serviette?
I call myself the human serviette because I help serve the youth, but I want to help serve you guys right now, Damon. And who else do you have in the group with you right here? Who is the gentleman that just took my hat? That's a nice smile.
All right, Dozy Bollocks, how you doing?
Good to see you again. Good to see you again.
Happy to be here.
Are you happy to take my hat? Are you happy? Are you happy?
Are you happy?
Well, what about your other bandmate? Do you like taking all the attention?
Are you?
I am very happy. I'm not that happy until I get my hat back.
You look happy.
Now, Dave, you haven't talked about your other bandmate there. You're taking all the attention here. You're neglecting your other bandmate. Who's behind you right there? Damon, who's to your right?
You right, Dozy Bollocks? You happy?
No, I'm not.
You don't look happy.
I am not. I want my hat back, please. Okay, there we go. If you could please, Dave, acknowledge who's behind you right now. Well, I will do right now. Who are you?
You know who I am.
You're Alex.
That's right.
So, Alex of Blur, who invented fish and chips?
Who invented poo?
Dave Rowntree of Blur actually thought this was an acceptable way of treating a human being. The rest of Blur just stood around laughing while their drummer tormented this interviewer.
Let's just look into the history here of Blur for Damon. Let's look into the history of Blur for a second, shall we?
Okay.
What the history of Blur is, Alex, where did you guys go to school? Where did you guys go to school?
I went to Stanway Comprehensive.
But where did you go to school, Alex?
I went to Bournemouth School.
Hey, Dave, I'm wearing a t-shirt. Oh, wait a second, Dave. Dave, I'm wearing a t-shirt right now. I'm wearing a t-shirt right now. And some people are saying I'm wearing a Blur or Shite shirt. But am I wearing a Blur or Shite shirt, Dave, of Blur? Dave, do you think I am wearing a Blur or Shite shirt?
No.
No, I'm not. Because I love Blur. And I wanted to acknowledge you guys by saying first, right off the bat, what shirt am I wearing?
Goldsmiths. Well, there you go.
School.
Yes.
Lewisham, SC14.
Yes, now you went to school here.
That's college, really. We call that college.
And did you go to school here at all, Damon?
No, I enrolled in a part-time music course to give me entrance to the Union Bar.
I was wondering about that because what I was trying to get at with Dave is Dave didn't go to that school because you did kind of go to the school, didn't you?
Well, I drank a lot there, but Dave drank there as well, you know.
But he didn't go to school there, and maybe that's why he's acting in that way. Do you think that's why he's acting in that way there, Alex?
I think he just doesn't like you very much, mate.
So calm. What is the traits of Dave that makes him got that fire in his belly?
Well, you know, he's not always like that. He's obviously bring out a certain side to him, which I have to say I find rather attractive.
Graham Coxton, the guitarist, shortly left, and in 2003, Blur were put to bed. One big question remains.
But one big question remains. Our editor would like to know who you think was better, you lot or Oasis.
Well, that's not a very grown-up question for Newsnight, is it?
I'll pass that on.
I think Oasis were better.
Do you?
Yeah, I
You
think
don't.
I do. I think they were better at communicating who they were than we were.
So there you go, folks. Oasis are better. In 1993, Radiohead came onto the scene. They had their first top 10 hit with Creep that hit number 7 in the charts. They've had 6 UK number 1 albums and 7 UK top 10 singles with songs like Paranoid Android, Karma Police, No Surprises and Street Spirit Fade Out. The early 90s would see a rise of bands like The Verve. They had their first top 10 hit in 1997 with Bittersweet Symphony, which hit number 2 in the singles chart, then followed by a number 1 with The Drugs Don't Work. Acts like Stereophonics broke through, Supergrass, and many more. In fact, there's an advert here that might help you remember.
What do you call an album with all your favourite bands on it? The Dogs album! The Manics, Space, Oasis, Supergrass, and all that lot. Apparently, what they've done right is nicked all the best tunes from this year, 40 of them, and stuck them all on one record. Is that allowed? I mean, it's not fair on all the others, is it? Don't get stuck with the Dogs dinner. Get the Dogs album.
UK bands were on the rise again. They were breaking the charts with only competition from these awful TV talent shows. And as we were approaching a new decade, the landscape of music as a whole was changing. The 2000s had arrived. Everything was going a bit more modern. The internet was now accessible. And there was introductions to many new acts such as Muse, Coldplay, The Cause, and Feeder. They had their first top 10 hit with Buck Rogers that hit number 5 in the charts in 2001. Overall, they've had 9 UK top 10s and 11 UK top 40s. In that same year, Gorillaz released their first album. Their first 2 hits made it into the top 10, with Clint Eastwood hitting number 4 in the charts and 19-2000 hitting number 6 in the charts. The second album, on the other hand, only got to 65 in the charts. Oasis also had their fair share of hits around this point. They released 2 albums in the year 2000, one being Standing on the Shoulder of Giants, and the other one being Familiar to Millions. They had a number 1 hit with their first single, Go Let It Out, followed by 2 number 4 hit singles with Who Feels Love and Sunday Morning Call, followed by another number 1 hit with The Hindu Times, followed by Stop Crying Your Heart Out, which hit number 2 in the charts, followed by Little, which hit number 2 in the charts, followed by Songbird, which hit number 3 in the charts, followed by, actually, I'll mention another band now, The Darkness! Yeah, they also had hits. And Busted, and McFly, and all those sort of bands, well, pop bands. But still not as authentic as Travis, who you can tell are British by the way they sound. And a band that's worked and worked to get where they are. They're not just bought in. A lot of bands these days seem to have rich parents that had rich parents that had rich parents. And you see what I mean? Like, the nepotism is disgusting. I'm surprised we can't sort it out in a country like this. But anyway, Travis had their first top 10 hit in 1999 with Why Does It Always Rain on Me, followed by another 4 top 10 hits. On the 20th of December 2003, Ozzy Osbourne and his daughter Kelly had a number 1 hit with the Black Sabbath song Changes. It was very sudden and came out of nowhere, but it proved that heavy metal gods can still break the charts in the early 2000s. The Streets was another band to come out of the early 2000s. In 2004, they had 2 top 10 hits with Dry Your Eyes and Fit But You Know It. But all in all, there weren't many bands that charted in 2003 or 4. But there was one band that year that helped the paradigm shift. On the 28th of February 2004, Keane released Somewhere Only We Know, which peaked at number 3 in the charts. Their album Hopes and Fears went to number 1 in the charts, and stayed there for 5 weeks, making way for The Scene with No Name, which brought new indie acts to the forefront of the party. Franz Ferdinand hit the UK number 3 spot with Take Me Out, causing their self-titled album to also peak at number 3 in the album charts. Even pop artists at the time were trying to copy off the indie look. Signs of the industry jumping on the bandwagon were starting to show. In 2005, there was a return from Damon Albarn with Gorillaz, appealing over to the US market as well, and featuring American artists and intertwining hip-hop with Britpop, hitting a number 2 spot with Feel Good Inc. and Dare, which hit the number 1 spot. Razorlight had their first top 10 in 2004 with Golden Touch, which hit number 9 in the UK charts. And then a year later, they hit the number 2 spot with Somewhere Else. And then in 2006, their self-titled album peaked at number 1 in the charts. Their first single, In the Morning, peaked at number 3 in the charts. But then they hit the number 1 spot with America. The Arctic Monkeys was another 2005 band that charted everywhere, peaking at number 1 in the charts for Bet You Look Good in a Dance Floor. And from the Welsh village of Quillan returned Stereophonics, and on the 12th of March 2005, they had their first UK number 1 with Dakota. All in all, they've had 26 UK top 40s and 11 UK top 10s. Most of their albums have also hit number 1 in the UK charts. Oasis came back with an album in 2005 entitled Don't Believe the Truth. Their first single from the album, Lila, went straight to number 1 in the charts. Oasis's reign on the charts didn't end there. They had another number 1, with The Importance of Being Idle, being the first Oasis video to feature somebody else lip-syncing, and being the centre stage, and having the band members being in the background. Noel wrote the lyrics, with an apathetic outlook on life, strung out in a hotel on cocaine and other drugs. Rhys Ifans dances into a funeral director's and gets measured up for his funeral. Oasis have had 8 UK number 1 singles, 23 UK top 10 singles, and 26 UK top 40 singles. With that, they have had 8 UK number 1 albums, 11 UK top 10 albums, and 30 UK top 40 albums. From 2009, Oasis sold over 75 million records worldwide, making them one of the best-selling bands of all time. Straight from the grimy streets of Leeds came Kaiser Chiefs. They broke into the charts in 2004 and had a number 6 hit with Oh My God, shortly followed by hitting a number 9 spot with I Predict a Riot, and a number 10 with Every Day I Love You Less and Less. They had a number 11 hit with Modern Way. Their 2005 album, Employment, peaked at number 2 in the UK charts, and it stayed there for 101 weeks, spilling over into the very next year. Their album received a British Ivor Novello Award, and then they received 3 Brit Awards on the same night. And then they won another one.
The nominations for British group are Coldplay, Hardfight, Why Don't You Walk Around the Murder Now? Why Don't You Walk Away? Why Don't You Walk Away? Don't feel Kaiser Chiefs. Gorillaz.
And the winner is Kaiser Chiefs.
And another one.
And the nominees are Oasis,
Fuck, I should have won it. Who is this guy? Well, I've got my own award, and it's better than that, and I love it. Get in there. All right, we don't know who that is.
That's Banks for you.
Thanks, Mick. Thanks, James. Thanks, Mark and Martin. And bye.
This means the world.
There's no label that unites these bands: Franz Ferdinand, Dogstein, Hot Cars, Kaiser Chiefs, Razorlight, the Libertines, the Zootons,
Block Party,
Future Heads. They're all there in the new British bands, but there's not one scene that, not one label that covers it, which is good, and it means that all these bands have a much greater chance of longevity. If they called it Britskank, right, then Britskank, and everyone's going, Britskank, I love Britskank, me, and all flyers on all clubs would say, playing indie, new wave and Britskank, and then everyone would get really pissed off with Britskank. I hope no one actually puts Britskank on any front covers of any magazines.
It's rubbish. I'm dead against it. It's over. Britscank's finished.
The new wave of indie bands was taking off. Coldplay made a comeback with Speed of Sound, which hit number 2 in the charts, shortly followed by Fix You, which hit number 4 in the charts, and Talk, which went to number 10, causing their 2005 album X and Y to hit the number 1 spot in the UK charts, helping to fuel this new indie scene. Groups that would otherwise be considered as pop were starting to change up their sound in order to fit in. While being an admirable move from some fans, you could also argue that they were just jumping on the bandwagon. The Coops were another indie band that have had 10 UK top 40s and 3 UK top 10s, most notably known by their songs Naive and She Moves in Her Own Way. Snow Patrol also had their first UK top 10 in 2004 with the song Run, which hit number 5 in the charts. Then in 2006 they released You're All I Have, which went to number 7, and then Chasing Cars, which hit number 6 in the charts, causing their 2006 album Eyes Open to chart at number 1. The Automatic was another band to make it into the charts. They hit the number 6 spot with their song Monster, causing their 2006 album Not Accepted Anywhere to peak at number 3 in the album charts. The Feeling was another band from 2006 that heavily charted. Their first single Sewn went to number 7 in the charts, followed by Fill My Little World Right Up, which hit the number 10 spot, causing their first 2 albums to top the charts. 2006 saw the success of the Zootons. They hit the number 9 spot twice with Why Won't You Give Me Your Love and Valerie. They've had 9 UK top 40s, but only 2 UK top 10 hits. Kasabian was another band to chart in 2004. The first single, Clubfoot, only hit number 19 in the charts, but their self-titled album hit number 4 in the UK album charts. All in all, I've had 12 UK top 40 singles and 4 UK top 10s. The Fratellis also released 2 songs that went to the top 10 in 2006. They released Chelsea Dagger, which hit the number 5 spot, and Whistle for the Choir, which went to number 9, being their only UK top 10 hits. The Ordinary Boys was another band that managed to get into the charts in 2005. They had their first top 10 hit with Boys Will Be Boys, which hit number 3 in the UK charts. In 2006, Muse had a comeback with their album Black Holes and Revelations, which hit number 1 in the UK album charts, being already massively well known with songs like Plug-in Baby and Time Is Running Out. They've had 6 UK number 1 albums and 22 songs in the top 40. In 2007, Mika's first single, Grace Kelly, went straight to number 1 in the UK charts, and his first album, Life in Cartoon Motion, peaked at number 1 in the charts too, striking 5 UK top 10 singles. Kaiser Chiefs also hit their first UK number 1 with Ruby. Their 2007 album, Yours Truly Angry Mob, also went straight to number 1 in the UK album charts. They've had 9 UK top 40s and 5 UK top 10s, and have spent 122 weeks in the UK top 40. Becoming one of the biggest bands of 2007. Just Jack also had a massive hit in 2007, bringing a vocal delivery similar to The Streets, fusing ska, club and indie. They released Stars in Their Eyes, which went straight to number 2 in the charts,
It's a long way to come from the dog and duck.
but now seem to have faded into obscurity. The Hoosiers were another band to come out of 2007. They immediately hit the number 5 spot with Worried About Ray, shortly followed by hitting the number 4 spot with Goodbye Mr. A. Their 2007 album, The Trick to Life, went straight to number 1 in the charts, causing their popularity to skyrocket. Scouting for Girls was another band to chart in 2007. They had their first UK number 1 hit with their self-titled album. They've had 7 UK top 40s but only 1 number 1. Klaxons also had their first UK top 10 in 2007. Golden Scans, it hit the number 7 spot. Their 2007 album, Myths of Near Future, hit the number 2 spot in the album chart. Hardfire was another band in the mid-2000s period. They had their first UK top 10 with Hard to Beat, which went to number 9 in the charts, followed by Living for the Weekend, which hit number 15 in the UK charts. They've had 2 UK number 1 albums and 7 UK top 40s. At this point in time, indie bands managed to penetrate the club scene, appealing over to a wider demographic and generally getting played where they wouldn't usually get played. Generally the bands with a stronger, more punchy sound that got played in the clubs, as they captured the essence of nightlife in the city. The Script are a band from Dublin, Ireland, formed in 2007. They released their self-titled first album in 2008 and it peaked at number 1 in the charts. Their first single, The Man That Can't Be Moved, went straight to number 2 in the charts. They've now had 5 number 1 albums altogether, 4 UK top 10 singles and 11 UK top 40s. By 2008, we were starting to see a decline in bands reaching the top 10, and the invasion of new bands had begun to slow down. For example, No You Girls, released in 2009, only hit number 22 in the charts, and although their albums did pretty well, their singles never struck the same chord, like in 2014 when the Klaxons released There Is No Other Time, and it only went to number 42 in the charts. In 2009 there was more of a resurgence of drum and bass music than anything else. Chasing Status's 2009 song End Credits went to number 9 in the charts. They've had 4 UK top 10s and 8 UK top 40s. The Prodigy also made a comeback in 2009. They released Omen on the 21st of February that year, and it went straight to number 4 in the singles charts. They also released Warriors Dance that year, which hit number 9 in the singles charts. They've had 7 UK number 1 hits and 8 UK top 10s. On the 28th of August 2009, Oasis split up. Noel and Liam went their separate ways. Liam took the rest of Oasis's band members and made Beady Eye, while Noel started a different band called the High Flying Birds. Beady Eye's 2011 album, Different Gear Still Speeding, peaked at number 3 in the album charts, but unfortunately none of their songs made it into the top 10 or the top 20. Which begs the question, if already established well-known acts can't make it into the top 10, who else has a chance? You might be under the impression that the Arctic Monkeys dominated the UK charts, but that's not true. After the year 2007, they only had 1 UK top 10 with Why Do You Only Call Me When You're High. Even though they and other bands at the time were having UK #1 albums, none of the songs were actually getting into the top 10, or sometimes not even the top 40. For instance, in 2013, Black Sabbath hit the UK #1 spot with their album 13, but none of the singles actually made it into the charts. Same thing with Noel Gallagher's High Flying Birds. They only had 4 UK top 40s, no top 10s, and no #1 hits, even though they've had 3 UK #1 albums. With Coldplay being an exception and still managing to reach the top 10 singles charts, with songs like Paradise, Hymn for the Weekend, and Something Just Like This. Mumford and Sons were another band that came up in 2009. They managed to have 2 UK #1 albums, but they've only had 5 UK top 40 hits, with no UK top 10s, and obviously no #1 singles. And The Script had their last UK #1 hit in 2012 with Hall of Fame, featuring will.i.am from the Black Eyed Peas. The way things were going, it was starting to look like bands needed to start utilising popular guest features on their songs to get into the top 10. That, or changing up their sound to become more modern. But unfortunately, for some bands, these adjustments didn't pay off. They changed up their sound and released Madness in 2012, but it only hit the number 25 spot. The 1975 are a newer band that came out in 2013. They've had 4 UK #1 albums, but only 10 top 40s, 0 top 10s, and 0 #1 singles. Years and Years are a pop dance act that started charting in 2014. They've had 5 UK top 10s and 1 UK #1 with their 2015 hit, King. Although being nothing like their predecessors, they seem to be one of the only British bands breaking into the mainstream these days. Most of them do play instruments, but their sound would never be described as rock or indie. Unlike Royal Blood, which kept the hard rock sound. Being a newer band and charting in 2014 with their self-titled #1 album, Royal Blood, they have had 2 other UK #1 albums, but have also had no UK top 40 singles. And even now in 2021, where the charts is oversaturated with pop acts, the radio stations and chart systems in the UK have put up a brick wall against any new bands getting in.
You know, I work at a radio station and I know that we wouldn't touch some of the stuff that I've seen recommended and I've recommended because, you know, we're a multi-million-pound business and they like to play it as safe as possible, which, you know, could mean that it all ends before it should have, I don't know. But it's going to be safer on radio, and radio has never been as safe as it is now because it's become a big business, and it's you know, more about profit these days than it ever has been. We will play the playlist stuff 99% of the time, and then other times we'll play like 1% of really safe stuff that is new. The DJs will play pretty much what they want within reason, whereas Absolute and all the big national stations outside of Six Music, and I include Radio 1 for the most part in that, the DJs don't really have a say in what they play. I mean, of course, you know, we have a music team and we talk to them on a daily basis, and I say, I want to play this or I don't want to play that, and I submit stuff to them all the time. But 90% of the stuff I submitted, if it gets played, it won't be played in my show. So Absolute has 2 million listeners a week, and if we put on a random new band that are like a very niche band, 100 people in those 2 million might love it, but then 500,000 might turn off, and that's the thing they worry about.
With attitudes like that, it's no wonder we have no new UK bands. If radio DJs can't even change the system from the outside in, then who can? It's sad that UK bands just can't make it big anymore, and it's also sadly down to the fact that there are hardly any music jobs anymore in this country, with most of them being down in London, which begs the question, how many talent scouts are really out there looking for you? The state of music today has really gone down the pan, where solo artists like Ed Sheeran is considered the best that Britain has. Or, oh, not that Lewis Capaldi fella. So yes, the idea is we need to get back on track to bands. When we used to have legendary acts like Queen and the Beatles, how can we go from that to Ed Sheeran and Lewis Capaldi? It's about time we had a change of scenery anyway. This has been Invasion Network. Non-profit, just going at it like a boss. I hope you enjoyed my documentary. You don't have to subscribe, you can just watch it. I'm not going to bite your finger off now. Maybe just stay tuned for the next one. Woo!